Imagine this: a sunny afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood where a hardworking teenager is just trying to earn a little extra cash by mowing lawns. Everything seems peaceful, but then the unexpected happens. A neighbor calls the cops, claiming the teen is causing trouble. It sounds ridiculous, right? But that's just the beginning of this wild story. What starts as a harmless act of determination turns into a chain of events no one could have predicted. Before long, tensions rise, secrets come to light, and this very neighbor's life takes an unexpected and dramatic turn. How does a simple lawn mowing dispute lead to someone losing their home? Stick around to find out how one act of kindness and one call to the police changed everything in this small town. Trust me, you won't believe how it all unfolds. The teenager, Jake, had been mowing lawns in the neighborhood all summer. He was saving up for a new bike and had become a familiar, friendly face to most of the locals. But not everyone saw it that way. One particular neighbor, Mr. Caldwell, seemed to have a problem with everything Jake did. Whether it was the sound of the lawnmower or the mere fact that Jake was going door to door, Caldwell always found something to grumble about. On this particular day, Caldwell decided he'd had enough. From behind his curtains, he watched Jake push the mower across another yard. Caldwell muttered to himself, picked up his phone, and dialed the police. He claimed Jake was trespassing and disturbing the peace. When the cops arrived, Jake was confused but polite. The officers spoke with him briefly, then with Caldwell. What no one knew was that this confrontation was about to snowball into something far bigger. As the police left without issuing any citations, Jake returned to his work, though the encounter left him shaken. Word about the incident spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some residents were outraged at Caldwell for calling the cops on a kid just trying to earn an honest living. Others, though, stayed silent, afraid of crossing Caldwell, who had built a reputation for being difficult to deal with. Meanwhile, Jake's parents were furious. They approached Caldwell to ask why he had involved the police over something so harmless. But Caldwell dismissed them, claiming Jake was making a nuisance of himself. The argument became heated, with neighbors overhearing bits of it from their porches. Lines were being drawn, and tensions in the once quiet community began to bubble over. Unbeknownst to everyone, Caldwell had his own secrets that would soon be dragged into the open, revealing there was far more at stake than anyone had realized. The neighborhood was buzzing with gossip. Some residents started rallying behind Jake, offering him more lawns to mow and even leaving encouraging notes for him and his family. Others, however, began distancing themselves, wary of being dragged into the growing conflict. Caldwell, meanwhile, grew more isolated but didn't seem to care. He doubled down, filing a formal complaint with the Homeowners Association, claiming Jake was damaging property and lowering the neighborhood's standards. But things took a dramatic turn when one of Jake's supporters, Mrs. Alvarez, discovered something shocking while researching public records. Caldwell had a history of legal troubles, including unpaid taxes and disputes with former neighbors. Even more surprising, his house was on the verge of foreclosure. This information began circulating quietly among the neighbors, fueling speculation and outrage. Tensions reached their peak when a letter from the bank was mistakenly delivered to Mrs. Alvarez instead of Caldwell. What she read inside sent shockwaves through the community and set the stage for an explosive confrontation that no one saw coming. Mrs. Alvarez couldn't believe what she was reading. The letter revealed that Caldwell's house was set to be repossessed unless he came up with a significant payment by the end of the month. It all started to make sense. His hostility, his obsession with neighborhood rules. It wasn't about Jake at all. Caldwell was projecting his own frustrations onto the teenager. But what Mrs. Alvarez didn't expect was the second page of the letter, which hinted at an ongoing legal investigation into Caldwell's finances. It seemed his troubles ran deeper than anyone had imagined. When Jake's parents heard about the letter, they were hesitant to get involved, wanting to keep the focus on their son. But the neighborhood had other plans. A group of neighbors, led by Mrs. Alvarez, decided to confront Caldwell directly at the next HOA meeting. Caldwell, unaware of the storm brewing, walked into the meeting confidently. As the accusations started flying, Caldwell tried to brush them off, but one neighbor stood up and announced that he had proof of something even bigger, a forged document connected to Caldwell's financial dealings. The room fell silent. Caldwell's face turned pale as the weight of his actions and the consequences finally began to sink in. The tension in the room was unbearable as the neighbor holding the forged document placed it on the table for everyone to see. It was undeniable proof that Caldwell had been falsifying paperwork to delay the foreclosure on his house. Gasps filled the room as Caldwell tried to defend himself, but his excuses quickly unraveled. The HOA board, once tolerant of his antics, demanded he explain himself, but Caldwell had no answers. Meanwhile, Jake and his parents sat quietly in the back, watching the spectacle unfold. What started as a petty complaint about a lawnmower had exposed a web of lies and deceit. Just when it seemed Caldwell's downfall was complete, one final twist emerged. The bank representative, who had been contacted by Mrs. Alvarez, arrived with a surprising announcement. Caldwell had not only ignored foreclosure warnings, but had also misused HOA funds to cover his debts. With his reputation in ruins and his home officially repossessed, Caldwell had no choice but to leave the neighborhood. As he packed his things, Jake returned to mowing lawns, receiving support and admiration from the very community Caldwell had tried to turn against him. In the end, the teenager's resilience became the story that united the neighborhood, proving that sometimes even the smallest acts of kindness can spark the biggest changes. With Caldwell gone, the neighborhood felt a renewed sense of peace. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves started coming together, inspired by the way Jake handled the situation with quiet dignity. Jake didn't dwell on the drama. He went back to mowing lawns, working harder than ever to reach his goal. Soon he had saved enough for his bike, and the whole neighborhood chipped in to surprise him with an upgraded model as a way of saying thank you. Mrs. Alvarez became a close family friend, often checking in on Jake and his parents. The community, once divided by Caldwell's negativity, had grown closer, learning the importance of standing up for one another. Jake's story became a reminder that small acts of kindness and hard work can ripple through a community, creating change in ways no one expects. And as Jake rode his new bike down the street, he knew he'd earned every bit of it.